It feels like now, more than ever, the end of the world is coming. Or at least more people are talking about the end of the world. Are we actually living through the apocalypse?
It feels like everything that could possibly go wrong has not just gone wrong, it's gone really wrong. Just when you feel like 2020 can't contain any more grief, there's something new and unexpected right around the corner.
This is my colleague, HuffPost religion reporter Carol Curavilla, and much like me, Carol has found herself thinking about the apocalypse.
Maybe it's because of the pandemic that all of that feels much more scary. But for some reason, those personal traumas that I'm seeing in all my friends' circles and in my own family, it just feels so much heavier this year. And I think it's just because of that I've just started thinking about, is this the apocalypse? Like, is this actually what's happening?
The day of doom is coming.
But the idea of an apocalypse is nothing new.
Have my background from class.
What is it?
It's an apocalyptic text from, one of the Coptic Gnostic texts.
This is Professor Giovanni Bazzana. He teaches the New Testament and early Christian studies at Harvard Divinity School. According to Professor Bazzana, apocalyptic thinking
began around that time in the 2nd century BCE, the 1st century CE, around the time of the birth of Jesus and many other events that happened in the Mediterranean area. So if you're looking historically into that time period, it is quite clear that the birth of this literary genre, but also the birth of this way of thinking, is associated with a lot of changes that are going on politically, socially. In particular, for the Jewish examples like Daniel, Enoch, the book of Revelation, it's a way to respond, to cope with oppression that people are experiencing, for the most part, political and religious oppressions.
But apocalyptic thinking isn't only limited to biblical literature.
You can see it almost everywhere in the world. I mean, basically, wherever you find some kind of religious thinking, there's always some notion about the end of time, the end of the world. It's very strong in Buddhism. It's very strong in many Native American religious traditions. So it's everywhere.
Concepts of the apocalypse extend beyond religion as well.
In the modern day apocalypse, we're thinking about the end of the world in terms of all of the things that we fear. It's not religious based at all.
This is Annamaria Bounds. She's a professor of sociology at Queens College in New York. She's also written a book about the apocalypse called Bracing for the Apocalypse. Anna believes that our contemporary apocalyptic thinking is based on direct experience. It deals with things like fears that we have about climate change, fears that we have about terrorist attacks, fears that we have about the collapse of the government, the economic collapse. And thinking about, talking about, and imagining the apocalypse is our way of trying to
get control over the situation, right?
Right. For example, when watching post-apocalyptic movies and TV shows, we often
put ourselves in, the hero's position and think, here's what I would do. Here's what they should do. It raises all sorts of interesting questions in terms of, our approach to survival, what would matter to us, who we would want to be with, what we would want the new world to look like. It's validating in a very basic way.
And while we often associate the apocalypse with doomsday or the end of the world, maybe in truth, the apocalypse is more complicated than that.
It could be a destructive moment for a nation, for all humankind, and this could fit this moment really in very many ways. The pandemic or climate change, of course, is often called an apocalypse. But it's also an individual experience. It can be the apocalypse of a single individual life, and that's true too.
And if we go back to the Greek roots of the word itself,
the apocalypse is quite literally a revelation and uncovering. It's this idea that all these things that are hidden in the world all of a sudden become known and are laid bare for people to see. All these different inequities that we're seeing emerge in our world today. I think it is good to have them be brought up and shine a light on them and have to confront them.
And so perhaps, instead of leading to despair, a moment like this presents us with an opportunity for hope.
As people living through the apocalypse and preparing ourselves for a post-apocalyptic world, maybe you're trying to imagine what we could possibly do to work for that justice, to make that vision of the world as it should be become a reality.